Hey, what's up everyone, and welcome to another video. And this is going to be a little bit different for the channel because I'm going to be talking about, bam, this movie right here, Black Panther, which of course everybody's talking about it. Everybody loves it. It's a huge success, yada yada yada. You know, because you've probably already seen it. You talk to your friends about it. You talk to people you don't even know about it. You loved it. You cried. You laughed. Yeah, whatever you did. You loved this movie. You loved this movie. And if you didn't, I'm just kidding. If you didn't like it, that's fine. But it's a great film. I really, really love the film. Very much so. I've seen it 3 times in theaters. I think it's a great film. So, what am I here? What am I here? What? Why am I here talking about it again? Well, I want to talk about the box office because, of course, it's making a lot of money. It's making a lot of money. It made $202 million in its first weekend. If you count the 4-day weekend, because it came out on President's Day weekend, it made around like 241, 42 million. It made a lot of money, but the first weekend, the 3-day weekend, it made 202 million, over $200 million, which is insane. People were not expecting that. Closer to when it came out, people were expecting like 180, 190, maybe 200, and it definitely cracked the 200, $202 million. That is absolutely insane. I don't think anybody was predicting that. I think most people were predicting 150 before, like months before the movie even came out, and then it just started like ramping up, and people were talking about it and going, oh my god, I can't wait to see this. And everybody was just so hyped for it, and it showed. People were going in droves. People loved it. There was so much critical praise for it. It's a great film, so you should go see it if you haven't seen it. I don't know. I mean, I guess you could go see Samson. You want to go see Samson? Do you even know what that is? Well, you can go see it. I guess you can go see Jumanji again. Go see this. Go see that. You can go see Every Day. You don't want to see that. Just see great Black Panther. I was gonna say Greatest Showman, but there's a reason why I was about to say Greatest Showman. But the reason why I'm actually here is because I wanted to talk about the box office for this film and try to predict how it's gonna do in the next couple of weeks overall. See how much money it's gonna make in America. I'm not gonna try to predict the foreign gross because that's almost impossible because you never know what markets it's coming out and stuff, and you never know what Japan thinks of Black Panther ahead of time, if they're going to really like it or not. You can't predict that stuff. I mean, I guess you could if you live in Japan and stuff. It's easier. And I'm sure there's plenty of people in America that can. I'm not even going to try. So we're going to talk about American box office. The movie's going to make $1 billion. There's no way. It already made 700 million, and over here it's going to make at least 300 more. So right there, it's going to make $1 billion. But yeah, it's definitely going to make $1 billion, and it definitely deserves it. But what I want to talk about is how much it's actually going to make. You know, maybe not exact amount, but, you know, let's try to predict this. And I actually have a lot of comparisons. Okay? I got a lot of comparisons. Mostly MCU related because, of course, this is an MCU movie, big budget superhero film, part of the MCU. And these movies usually have a very obvious drop-off point. You know, like the first weekend, you know, Avengers 1 did like 207 million. Then the next weekend it did 103. So it dropped 50%. That's actually a pretty decent drop for a movie like this. Most of the time, drops are around the 60% range. Like Captain America Civil War dropped 59% its second weekend. Avengers 2 dropped around 59%. Same thing for Deadpool. Deadpool dropped around 57%, I believe. So these Marvel films, and I know Deadpool's not part of the MCU, a lot of these really big ones, big ones, drop. Okay, they do drop. So in the second weekend, but this one only dropped 45%, less than 45%. It was like 44.7%, I believe. And it made 202 million its first weekend. Second weekend made 111. So that is incredible for a movie like this that people are really hyped for, really want to see it the first weekend. Usually you see a lot of people go see it either again or for the first time the second weekend, but you see a big drop. You know, Captain America, almost 60% drop, you know. And Black Panther was in that movie. That was the first time you got to see him. Same thing for Spider-Man. You know, you had a lot of stuff riding that movie. It might as well have been another Avengers film. But this one, it's just Black Panther, and people really want to see it because it's such a huge cultural phenomenon. One thing I want to really talk about is that it's not part of the MCU, but The Last Jedi. The Last Jedi, which of course was the sequel to Force Awakens, as everybody knows. Force Awakens did incredible. Did 247 million its first weekend. Second weekend, it dropped only like 40% to $150 million. That is incredible. That's a huge, huge, what's the word I'm looking for? That is a very small drop and a huge, huge second day weekend. It is amazing. And it came out Christmas. Christmas movies do better, you know, Christmas and New Year's Eve and New Year's Day and all that stuff. Those two holidays, movies do extremely well because people are off, you know, with family and stuff, and they want to go see a film, so they do extremely well. Even bad movies do well during those weekends. So, you know, that was the main reason why. Now, when we come to Last Jedi made $220 million, which is a dip from the first movie, but, you know, that's what you expect. Because, you know, it's a sequel to a movie. Now Star Wars is back, so it's not a huge thing anymore, but still people want to see it. And then its second weekend, it dropped huge, 67% drop, and that's during Christmas. It was right before Christmas. Its second weekend was right before Christmas. Christmas was on Monday. Its weekend was right before that. And it dropped 67%. That was a huge drop for a holiday and for a movie like this. If this movie didn't come out during the holidays for Christmas, like it came out summer, we would see maybe like even a 70% drop. But to be honest, if it came out in summer, we probably wouldn't have a $220 million opening weekend too. It would probably be closer to around like 180, maybe even less. And then the second weekend will probably like pick up a little bit more, maybe like around 90 to 100 million, besides like I think around 70 million, which is what the second weekend was for Last Jedi. So that was huge, and that was during a holiday, a huge holiday, 2 holidays. It was sandwiched in between 2 pretty much, or it was leading up to 2. So people were off, people were ready, and sure, I guess people were doing last minute shopping and stuff, but that still, 67%, that's a huge drop. It should have done maybe like 55%. 67, that's crazy. So that movie dipped hard. Now when we see Black Panther, 45% for a movie that came out in February, and sure, you had President's Day, but that was it. There was no weekend. I mean, there's no holiday the next weekend. There was nothing. It was just a regular weekend, and it dropped only 45%. There's even other movies out that weekend. It's not like there was nothing. You know, if you had kids, you could go see Early Man. Not that anybody would, but, you know, no one saw that movie. Early Man was still out. Annihilation was out for the grown-ups. What else? Kids could still see Peter Rabbit. You know, there's a bunch of other stuff to see. So that is incredible that it held that well. So that's very impressive. And it looks like for the next few weeks, even though there are big movies coming out, like A Wrinkle in Time, and we got, of course, Ready Player One, Pacific Rim. We got a bunch of movies coming out. It looks like it's not going to slow down. Like, I predict for its second weekend, probably another 40% drop, which would give it, what, around 60-something million right there? So that's incredible. But what I want to do right here, I'm going to get rid of the poster right now. Just real quick. Sorry, Black Panther. What I want to do right now is I want to look at a few, and you're going to see a glare on my glasses. I apologize. But we're going to look at some of the other movies in the past, like maybe year or so, that have done very well at box office and kept doing well every weekend after its first weekend. First movie I want to talk about, and this is probably the best comparison of how I think Black Panther is going to do for the next few weekends. The first one is Get Out. I think Get Out is a perfect example. Came out, of course, in February. It was very black-centric. It was a cultural phenomenon. People loved it. Had a huge Rotten Tomatoes score, everything. People loved it. It was great. So let's look at this. All right, this is not Black Panther. I'm sorry. This is Get Out. It came out around the same time, February. A little bit later in February, but came out. As you can see, it had a very small drop, especially since it's a horror film. Horror films usually, just like superhero films, drop pretty big in its second weekend. Now, some people will argue Get Out was more comedy than horror, but it still had its horror elements. And it was there making political statements and stuff like that. You know, it was there not just to be a funny little movie. You know, there was reasons for the things happening on screen. But besides just to be like, whoa, he's saying something funny or whatever. So what we have here, the first weekend, $33 million, great weekend. People were like, whoa, that's crazy. We thought maybe 20 million. So 33 million. Then the next weekend, most people were saying like it's probably going to drop around 40, 50%. So it'll probably do like high teens, maybe 20 million, straight up 20 million. And bam, only dropped 15%, 28 million, and then 26%, let's average it out, 27% in its third weekend, then 35, then 34, then 36, 28, 26, 44. It never had a huge drop. It never did. 44 is not even that huge of a drop, especially since it was in its, like, what, at that point, what, like ninth weekend or whatever. I'm not going to count it, but I'm just going to say ninth, whatever. Anyway, it's been out for a few weeks at that point. So that's pretty damn big, you know, especially for a horror film. But because the critical reception was so big and it was such a cultural phenomenon that it was tackling all these racial subjects and stuff, it was a really big hit with anybody, really. So it actually played out not like a horror film, but more like something that would come out during Christmas, except it came out in February. So that is a really good comparison on how I think Black Panther is going to do in the next few weeks. Now, I don't think it's going to only drop like 15%, 26%, but I think it's going to do this kind of numbers where you have a very small little dip compared to how big the movie's weekend is. You know what I mean? Like 202 million, you're not expecting like 50% dip for the next weekend because it's $202 million. There's no way it's going to make like, what would 50% off be of that? Like 170 million or something like that? There's no way that second weekend would be like that. There's no way. Not even Star Wars, when it first came out, could do that. Or came back, I guess, could do that. So no one was expecting that. But for a movie like Black Panther, I could see it dropping 44 and then maybe 40%, then maybe around late 30s, I mean, not late 30s, or high 30s, and then keep doing that, like etching out its own little successful little run by staying in there, being a really, really good choice for film goers, where even though there's other things like Pacific Rim and all that stuff, big budget movies, people are still seeing Black Panther because it is a huge, huge phenomenon. Another comparison I want to make is the recent Jumanji film. This is the box office for Jumanji. By the way, all this box office is coming from Box Office Mojo. So go check those guys out. They're pretty cool. They're pretty cool. Jumanji came out during Christmas, and when you think of a Christmas movie, at this point you think of Star Wars doing extremely well, but Star Wars did okay. It still did fine, but again, it had a huge drop. What didn't have a drop was Jumanji. Jumanji, oh my God, it almost made $400 million in America, and I think it's still going, so I think it's probably going to make over $400 million in America, and it might even cross $1 billion. I don't think anybody was anticipating that. I think most people were like, it'll probably do like 400, 500 million, you know, that's pretty good, and then we'll get a sequel. We're definitely going to be getting a sequel now. This movie's doing incredible, but the first weekend, we had a $36 million weekend, and this is a perfect example of what I was saying, where like Christmas really brings something up, or not even just Christmas, but New Year's also. First weekend, it came out for Christmas, $36 million. Not too terrible, you know, for a $90 million budget movie during Christmas. That's pretty good. That's like kind of like Sherlock Holmes 2 money. I remember when Sherlock Holmes 2 came out, it made like $40 million. People were a little worried because the first movie did so well. But then it stayed with it for the next couple weeks, and it made a good amount of money. Kind of reminded me of that a little bit. So then we get a week after that. It didn't even dip. It went up. It went up 38% to 50 million. And if you count the 4-day weekend with the, of course, New Year's Eve or New Year's Day, 66. So it went up 83%. Oh, wow. So it went It went up 38%. Then it only dipped the next weekend with no holiday and people going back to school and people, of course, having work and all that stuff. It only dipped 25%, then 24%, then oh, well, actually, that's the 4-day weekend. Then it went down 30%, 17%, 32%, 8%. It just kept going down very small increments, and it was really, really impressive. So this is another comparison. A movie like this. Now, it did come out during Christmas, but you can see a lot of its money did come from January. A lot of it. Maybe not all of it, obviously, but a lot of it came from not holidays. So I could see something like this being like how Black Panther does, where Black Panther really does stick in there, okay? Now, I also added a couple extra things that aren't really comparisons. I just wanted to add them just to talk about them, because I never really talk about box office, even though I should have a weekly series where I talk about box office, because I love talking about box office. Next one I want to talk about, this is The Greatest Showman. Now, The Greatest Showman came out, and it just fell flat. Like, its first weekend, it made $8.8 million. That is sad right there. Oh, no, pointing the wrong way. There you go. That is sad. That is disgraceful. $8.8 million for a movie that cost $84 million. Like, it was looking like it was going to be a huge bomb, but it stayed in there for the 4-day weekend. If you count Christmas, it did 14 million. Pretty good. Okay. Next weekend, it went up 76% to 15.5 million. Whew. And that 4-day was a 137% increase, which is great. Then it just kept slowly dipping. 13 million, 11.3% dip, 9.5% dip. Then 14, then 10, then about 20, 16, 21. 32, that's probably its biggest dip. Yeah, that's actually definitely its biggest dip. And it's making its way out of theaters now, but it stayed there for 2 months. People are still watching it. When you compare this number to Early Man or Maze Runner or stuff like that, stuff that is still kind of new or it's been out for a few weeks, not 2 months, that is insane. This movie held on for so long, and right now it has $160 million domestic. That is insane, and it's a huge cultural phenomenon too, just like Black Panther and I guess Jumanji too, because people are listening to this music and doing covers and dancing to it and reacting to it on YouTube and stuff. So there's a huge fan base for this. So I could see Black Panther doing so as well as something like this. But the first, I would say the first ever big budget movie that did well at the box office, but periodically did well. Like, not at first like 200 million, then dipped, and it was gone. The biggest one, I would say, is Titanic. Titanic came out, and it's another Christmas movie, by the way. You'll see a lot of my examples besides Get Out are Christmas films, or came out for Christmas. You got Titanic. It made $28 million in its first weekend, which I can only assume was a disappointment at the time, because it cost like, what, $180 million to make? Hold on one second. Woo! Product placement. So anyway, $28 million, that must have been a disappointment. But I'm assuming the studios knew that it would stay in there for a little while, and maybe they'll make a little bit of money. They'll make a little bit, whatever. Next weekend, went up 23%. Ever since then, it just dipped little bits here and there, and it went up a little bit, and went down, went up, went down, went up. And it just kept fluctuating to the point where it made over $600 million in America. That's not even including the re-release that came out a few years ago that added 3D. If you include that, it's like $650 million, and it's not including inflation. Inflation, it's probably made over like 800, 900 million, most likely, in America alone. Worldwide, it's made almost, what, I think over 2 billion, I think? I'm not exactly sure. I should have added that to my notes. I do have notes here. So there is a lot of comparisons that we can make for how well Black Panther will do in the next few weeks. The biggest one I still think is Get Out. Get Out came out at the perfect time to compare to Black Panther. The same time is Black-centric, of course. Has a lot of cultural... It's a cultural phenomenon, just like Get Out. When Get Out came out, it was pretty big. It was, everybody was talking about it, trying to discuss it and stuff like that. And hold on, I'm trying to get my Get Out numbers back. And just the way the numbers are fluctuating here, I think it's going to be very similar to how Black Panther is, where I think in the third weekend, you're going to see a dip of around, I'd say around 40%, so it's not going to be like exactly the same when it comes to number dip, but you have to kind of give it some leniency because, again, Black Panther is such a huge movie that makes a lot of money. If Black Panther came out and made $33 million in its first weekend, first of all, that would be a huge bomb. Second of all, like the second weekend would be around like a 15% dip, I would say. It would be like exactly how Get Out did. So that's what I'm trying to say, is that it like comparison-wise, maybe not exactly the same, but it's going to do this kind of business where it's going to just slowly dip. So when I was thinking about this myself before the video, what I think Black Panther is going to do is I think it's going to do around... I added it up and I thought this is how it's going to do, okay? It's going to do around $65 to $70 million this weekend. After that, it's going to maybe like do like 35, 40, it's fourth. And then maybe like around 30, it's fifth, and it's just going to keep dipping down there, 20, then 15, then maybe around 12. It's going to slowly leave theaters. And I think after all is said and done, in America, it's going to make just around $750 million. That's where I think it's going to make. Maybe even a little bit more. Maybe around 765 to 700. maybe even 800 million. Like I'm gonna say right here, my estimate $765 million. That's where Black Panther will, I guess, stop making money. That's the area, especially if you compare it to stuff like The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight made 158 million its first weekend, and then, or 51. No, it was 58. And then it dropped, but not huge. It was like a 50% drop or whatever, and slowly went to $530 million or something like that. It's gonna be similar to how that movie plays out as well, I think. I know I'm confusing a lot of people. This is just how my brain works. But Get Out is a good example of how I think this movie is going to play out. But I just want to kind of talk about the box office a little bit. This was an excuse so I can talk about how well some of these movies have done in the past year. And this is a great example. These three that I just showed you and Black Panther are examples of what Hollywood should do for now on. Okay, I get it, superhero movies, of course, you know, those are gonna do well, but when it comes to shit like Geostorm and stupid ass other disaster films and these dumbass like mummy movies and whatever, and it just, those aren't what people want. People want stuff that is original and fun and, you know, maybe a little bit familiar, you know, but it's stuff that is still fun and new enough. You know, you don't get too many musicals. That's why people want to go see Greatest Showman. You don't get too many movies like Jumanji, where it's a comedy action film based around video games and stuff, and of course it has a big license and stuff. So people went to go see that, especially during Christmas, where they had either Star Wars or a bunch of shitty movies. I guess they also had Greatest Showman, which I think is a very fun film. But Jumanji was a great choice if you wanted a comedy, so they wanted to go see that. There's not too many big budget comedies out there, so that's another case. Stuff like Get Out, people really wanted to see a horror movie that was intelligent. It was intelligent, it was funny, it was very, very, very well paced, and it was perfectly acted. It was extremely well written, extremely well directed. They wanted something like that, something smart. And the same thing for Black Panther. It's smart, it's very well written, very well done, very well paced. Maybe some of the action stuff isn't the best, but when it comes to what people wanted from this movie, I feel like it was really the culture and the significance, and they wanted someone to look up to. And a lot of people saw Black Panther and got exactly that. They got a superhero to look up to, not just black people, but white people, everybody. Everybody loved the character of T'Challa. He's a different superhero too when it comes to personality wise, because you have Tony Stark, you know, he's bumbling and funny. Everybody's funny in the Marvel universe at this point. Even Captain America is starting to become a little funny. But, you know, T'Challa, he has a couple of moments here and there, but for the most part, he's very stern, very serious. He is a king. And that is really, really awesome. I mean, I joke and say, like, Blade's the best superhero ever, but really he's an anti-hero, and he's kind of generic. He's just like, he's tough guy, you know, he's tough. And T'Challa is not just that. He's tough, sure, but he is a king. He resonates well with, I would say, the youth and the adults, and he does a great job, the actor, Chadwick Boseman. And that's why this movie, I feel like is doing so well, because it has a hero you can really look up to. Not just because he's awesome, you know, oh, look at how he does a backflip, but because he is very realistic in a way, I guess you could say. It's the most realistic superhero I've seen on screen in a very long time, probably since The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight trilogy I'm talking about, because that's probably the most realistic Bruce Wayne we've gotten, at least right now. So there you go. That is all I want to talk about. So there you go. That's my Black Panther video and the box office and whatnot. I hope you enjoyed it. You know, if you didn't, tell me how I can improve stuff like this. I thought I did an okay job. But oh, it's really late over here. And did I mention that? I don't think I did. But I apologize if you didn't care for it. But I thought it'd be entertaining to just talk about the box office and why it's so interesting to me. You know, like how movies dip in its second weekend. Some well praised ones like Deadpool and Civil War will dip to like 60% in its second weekend, but something like this wouldn't, because there's so many reasons, there's so many factors why. Same thing for Get Out and stuff like that. But anyway, there you go. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, and until next time, goodbye.